This segment we had planned to split, and I ended up doing it together. And so we will cover this, and then we're going to, Babette will cover procurement plan. And kind of what's happened with this process. We're in the first 3-year review cycle. Last school year, we did not have the procurement review part of the administrative review separate and one person dealing with it. And we decided, and I should say the state decided to, in interest of consistency, and also the procurement review was causing us to stay in your SFA longer. I know all of you love us, but you don't necessarily want us to hang around an extra day if we don't have to. And so for the 2017-18 school year, which we are in, we are looking at procurement records from 2016-17 school year. So whereas all of the other administrative review information you pull from this school year, the procurement review documents are to come from last school year. And there are pros and cons in us being on-site and off-site. One of the cons is you do have to organize your documents and send them to me. And that's, I guess, a mixed blessing. But one of the things we did want to accomplish was more consistency in the reviews. We have state agency staff that have never been a director in an operation. They don't have a lot of experience with procurement. They don't know how to look at a delivery ticket and decipher the difference between 80-20 ground beef, and I'm just throwing this out, 80-20 ground beef and 90-10 ground beef, or broccoli cuts and broccoli florets and broccoli stalks. And so we wanted some of that experience with purchasing and procurement and consistency. And you know, the result is that you will get a summary of findings for procurement, and you will get a summary of findings for the other parts of the administrative review. And it is handled that way because if I'm doing the procurement review, I need to sign that summary of findings, where in the future, if there are questions, they know that came from me. And we do still work as a team. And if I have questions, your team leader that's on site may actually ask you for some information related to procurement. Ideally, we would resolve all of that ahead of time. And kind of some lessons learned. You know, we started out, it was the end of August when I sent out the information where I sent the procurement tool, and I had a little memo in the email. We waited and sent that out until we had the actual schedule for the administrative review that was to be on site. Well, what's the problem? All of a sudden, all these procurement documents were coming in to me. So you may have sent your procurement tool to me in September, and your actual on-site review is March. am I going to look at your procurement tool before I look at the ones that are scheduled in October, November, December? No. So, you know, there are these gaps in time. The other thing is, once the school year ends at the end of June, there's no reason why in July we could not send out procurement tools and ask for you to give that to us. You know, for some of you, it might help you to get that out of the way when school is not going on. For some of you, you're not in the office during the summer. You may be a 10-month employee, but still, we're going to work at asking for procurement information earlier. We are going to clarify some of the requests. And this is where different schools use different terms for different documents. When I ask for a ledger, a lot of people are like, what? What do you mean? Well, if you've had accounting courses, you probably know what we're meaning by a ledger. Different software programs used in the school district call these things, in your district it may be called a paid vendor list. You know, they're different words for that same document. And what I am actually looking for is a list of everything that was paid out of your National School Lunch Program account for that previous year. I want invoices, invoice numbers, dates, company names, and dollar amounts. Well, I'm going to describe what I am looking for in that report, where if you have to go to your business office, you're going to take that email or print that email out and say, this is really what needs to be in the report. I also want an annual total by vendor. So you may send me this big long list. I'm not adding up 128 invoices from your primary grocery vendor to get a total for the year. You need to give that to me. So I'm going to have more clarity than what I had this year in asking for things. We also realized early on that we need more training for our SFAs, and thus you're here today. There will be people here next week. We're going to have these presentations posted on the Louisiana Fit Kids website. We're going to work on having the audio and slides posted, all to help. And then, you know, Babette alluded to this earlier, but, you know, we look at what we did last school year and this school year, and yet we also got more clarity from USDA about their expectations, and so we are in an actual process where we're doing a better job. Now, the lovely procurement tool was developed by USDA. And if Louisiana Department of Education does not use their procurement tool, what they want to use has to be approved by USDA in advance. So, we're going to use their procurement tool. It is in Excel. Please, please, please do not try to print it. It is not printer friendly at all. There are multiple errors, and we have notified USDA of the errors. We have seen their misspelled words. There are questions that if you answer no, it is supposed to be a finding, and it doesn't automatically populate the findings tab. And so, you know, that doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something to us. And, you know, we're going to continue to work with this. We cannot change the content, but there are some things we can do to make it easier for you to navigate within that procurement tool that we'll take care of. You know, when I sent all these out in August, you know, if I had only realized, I could have done some things to save, really not so much you, to save me a lot of time. And the procurement tool will always be available on the LDOE website. Every question that I have to answer is in the procurement tool. So if you want to go, you know, you only have to fill out one tab, that SFA procurement tab. If you want to go look at all the other questions I have to ask, download that procurement tool. If you're being reviewed next year, you can go look at it right now and say, okay, am I doing this? If I don't have this in my bid, I need to get it put in my bid before next year. And so Babette and the DOE staff, they've done a lot of work on that sample procurement plan to help you. And so we're going to look at that after I finish this presentation. All right, what is the SFA procurement table? This is the part of the procurement tool that you as the local director or supervisor has to complete. It includes areas for you to record all items purchased under your school lunch account for the prior school year. For example, we're in 2017-18 school year. All the rest of your administrative review looks at this year. The procurement review is looking at information from last year, which is 2016-17. And we use this list of how much you purchase by each vendor to select procurements that we are going to actually review. We do not look at every single invoice and every single item that you purchased from a vendor. So, how does this get completed? Well, you have to find the information in your own district, in your own charter school, in your own residential facility, and if you don't have it in your office, you have to go back and go to either your superintendent, your business official, the person who has the information. I cannot tell you where that's stored within every SFA. So the first section, if you look at your sample procurement tool that we gave you as a handout, the first section is procurement authority. With that, you have to complete the name, the position or title, the actual responsibilities that are related to procurement, and contact information. This should be very straightforward. In a very small district, you may just have the child nutrition director and the superintendent. If your board is a separate entity, which for most public schools it is, you may need the superintendent of schools if they approve contracts. So as we looked at this, we do not require every school manager to be listed under this procurement authority. We are looking primarily from large districts, the individuals in the central office that have a role to play in procurement. The small purchase threshold is the next section. We have had training and we have heard in Louisiana the small purchase threshold is $30,000 unless you are a charter school. Charter schools are allowed to follow the federal threshold, which is $150,000. And what this tells us is the maximum value that you can purchase using informal purchase procedures, procurement procedures. The two informal procedures are micro purchase and small purchase, where you do have to have quotes. Now, there is information that, again, we can talk about federal and state thresholds. You have to find out if your own district, if your own charter school, if you have a different threshold. I've reviewed some schools where anything over $1,000, they have to bid. And so you can set a lower, more restrictive threshold if you desire. You have to find out what that is and include that on the procurement table. The next section is titled Group Purchasing Services. And group purchasing organizations, and they may be a for-profit, they may be a not-for-profit organization. We do not see those in the state of Louisiana. But you need to be aware of what they are in case you're approached by a group. What happens with these organizations, they buy in larger quantities on behalf of all of their members. And because they buy in larger quantities, you expect to get better pricing. The problem is if they have already signed contracts with people and they may not have all of the required federal provisions, they may not be providing free and open competition if they're not allowing other sources to compete. And keep in mind that these group purchasing services are different from the SFA only cooperatives. The SFA only cooperatives are not considered to be a group purchasing service under the definitions that are established for this segment of your procurement tool. All right, then we get down to the next section, the micro purchase. And again, a lot of people will look at this and you see right across there, it says purchases from vendors valued at $3,500 or below. Some people have read that and think anything I purchased under $3,500 for the year needs to go here. That is not how you look at this. You look at your purchases and think, what method did I use to purchase this? If you determined that you were going to buy something, it's under $3,500 for a one-time purchase, and you did not get quotes, you did not do bids, you bought it under micro purchase. And with that, you have to describe goods and services provided, the total paid to that vendor for the school year, and how many purchases. So you see, that's the shortest one. You also have a comment section. And a lot of people this year under different categories under comments they would put things like emergency purchase of equipment. You know, if an oven goes out in a school and you have one oven, you're probably going to be trying to get that in as quickly as you can. You know, some people use that to let me know they were using state contract because, you know, everything's been up in the air with state contracts. As of earlier this week, you know, state contracts, you're not allowed to use them based on USDA's feedback. You know, we'll talk some more about things. Let me keep on with, here's what you put on the SFA procurement table. When we talk about aggregating purchases by vendor, we mean adding together everything for the year. So here with small purchase, goods and services provided, total paid to the vendor, whether it's a one-time or multiple purchase, if you got more than one response, and whether or not you used a GPO, that's a government purchasing organization, group buying organization, or a third party. Almost, really, I've had maybe one or two that check yes, and they actually were not GPOs or GBOs. Formal contracts. Here's where the value of the purchase, this is all review. We covered all of this morning multiple times. All right. Your type of formal contract. Fixed price means, or you may have a fee. It's a price that's fixed at the beginning of the contract, and it is guaranteed for a specific period of time. If you are using an escalation, de-escalation clause with milk, it is still a fixed price because you start out with a price based on that milk market. It only adjusts if the federal market price changes. Because some people have not been sure of what to put under their milk bids. Then cost reimbursable. That vendor gets reimbursed for cost, and it may be with or without a fixed fee. Now the example that I use for this is like maybe training. You may contract with someone to come in and do training for your organization, and you may put your solicitation out and say that you have 5 schools and you want 3 training sessions at each of your 5 schools, and then they bid on that. They give you a quote if they fill out an RFP. And the other place that we do see RFPs used primarily with processing USDA foods. In this formal section, same thing. You see a lot of these we're just kind of building. You still have to have goods and services provided, the contract value, solicitation type, contract type, how long the contract lasts. Typically, we are not going to see things longer than 1 year unless in the solicitation you made provisions for a renewal based on some factor. If you have something, and this is, I'll talk about that in food management companies. I want to know if you've got more than one response. If you say you got multiple responses and I choose that vendor, and when you send the information in, I only see one response, I've got to go back and select another vendor. So don't put you got multiple responses if you only got one response. And then if amendments were made, and I think I've seen maybe one over the course that I've looked at these where there was an amendment to a contract. Food Service Management Company contracts. All right, these contracts are limited to 1 year with up to 4 annual renewals. Now, the state agency is highly involved with this. Babette talked about this morning that the state has to approve these. But when I'm doing the procurement review, I'm asking for the original contract, and then I ask for the renewal for the review year. Why? The original contract typically has a price per meal, and that price per meal generally changes each year. So I've got to check that original contract to see if it's been approved by the state, and then when I check invoices, I've got to have that current meal price to compare to their invoices to see if they are being charged the correct price. And guess what? They're not always being charged the correct price. This is all part of contract management. Yes?
Is the same time applicable to vended meal models?
Vended meals have to be bid each year. And we have been in this discussion, what's the difference between a vended meal and a food service management company contract? I know some of you who have charter schools within your parish may have been contacted. They may want you to do vended meals for them. With vended meals, the meal is delivered to your door. The SFA pays the employees to serve the meal, to clean up, whatever. That's a vended meal. With the food service management contract, they handle everything. They handle the service of the meal, all of these things. And with these food service management company contracts, there are certain things in the contracts that I have to confirm they are. If in the food service management company contract, it says that you are going to, you as the SFA are going to have the health inspection reports. I'm going to ask you for health inspection reports for the food service management company. If you are paying a food service management company and your employees are not serving that meal, I'm going to expect that food service management company to have the license and get the health inspections, because your employees have nothing to do with it. And if your name is on it, and in Louisiana, everybody can go out there and check and read. If you're paying a food service management company and they're producing meals in a facility that is not clean, I'd be concerned. You want to know that the place where they are serving the meals meets the regulations. If they have 5 critical violations, by golly, I want to know. Yes. Okay, Babette, can you come where we can hear you?
It's okay.
Oh,
We're going to have to redo this.
okay. She said never mind. But they can hear you better if you come up here.
In addition, for your food service management company,
We are going to look at their operation on site. We're gonna check their permits on site. We also will go to their cooking facility. We have to go to the cooking facility. This is required by USDA. So we have to go and do an inspection at where they are cooking. So if it's a Chartwell's operation or a Sodexo operation, we're gonna need to know for the review where they're cooking the food, and we have to go there. Now, if we have the health inspectors don't come out but every couple of times a year. If we had a good inspection and it was only 3 or 4 weeks ago, we're not gonna keep bugging them. But if we're seeing critical violations, real problems, we will be going to the food service management company's cooking site. So, and you should have a copy of their inspection at your site and their permit, yes.
And personally, if I were doing vended meals, I would have in my contract that they're going to send that to me. Because if they're preparing your meals off-site, don't you want to know what kind of conditions that food that you're serving the children in your school is produced under? I hope you do. So, again, it's kind of like with the co-op. Just because, and I wish we had a room full of school administrators to tell them this. Just because you pay a food service management company, you are not absolved of responsibility. You are still responsible. The check is not made out to the food service management company. It is made out to the SFA. So, I think you can tell I believe in people being held accountable for what they're being paid for. And so we will move on. Okay, here's a whole list of, again, very similar things you have to put on this procurement tool. Now, yes.
What's your preference? Tell them about your preference for dollar amounts.
Okay. Oh, good. I do have that in my notes here. I haven't. Okay. When you go to the procurement tool that is in Excel, and again, this is one of the things that we would like to change, but we cannot change this form. There is a drop-down box that has a blank, and then it has some dollar ranges. I want to see the actual dollar amount. If you're spending $280,000 with a company, I don't want you to check the box that says, $250,000 to $500,000. I want you to enter $280,000. I don't need cents. I don't need the cents. Just the dollars. And part of the reason for that is because when I'm asking for information, and I kind of learned this the hard way, I was looking at a procurement tool. This table was filled out, and then I looked at the ledger, their list of paid vendors and how much money they'd spent with every vendor. And it wasn't a huge operation. It was. I'ma just pick numbers out of the air. All right, on the procurement tool, I total up and see what the total dollars were for each of these categories. Then I look at the ledger or the list of paid vendors. I get a total for that. Well, it was a like $350,000 budget for the year, according to that ledger. On the procurement tool, there's like $185,000. What does that tell me? They spent money out of the child nutrition account that is not reflected on the procurement tool. So, what do you think I did? I asked for those vendors on that ledger. I sent it back and said, you need to add these vendors. And so then I started thinking, well, how else can I kind of check this? Income expense report on the state agency website. I don't expect a perfect match, but yeah, you know, on the income expense report, they break it out into categories. If there is equipment listed on the income expense report and I have no equipment listed on the procurement tool, something's going on that I don't like. I'm not going to judge whether it was an oversight or whether it was intentional. It should be there. It's not there. You go back and add it. All right, I got a procurement tool. I'm getting into my thing for this afternoon on issues. So, but you see why I want the numbers. If you do not give me the numbers and I don't get a total by vendor on that ledger or that list, if I don't get an annual total, I'm going to send it back and ask you for it. So don't waste your time and my time. Get it on there to start with. Okay? Like I say, we've got quite an education over the past. You know, and you really have to kind of go through some of these things before you understand. And you've got to go through it before you understand. And we know that. But when you've got it on your income expense report, somebody's got that information. If you don't have it, you better go find who does have it. And where it makes it easier for the whole organization. And this is another fun one. The processing contracts for USDA foods. One of the things about these contracts, I think our SFAs in Louisiana are better educated than many across the United States because, you know, I mean, Louisiana's had some strong SFA supervisors and directors who want to do it right and, you know, are kind of OCD about doing it right and want every little detail. But, I mean, there have been people out there who think that the Department of Agriculture solicits the bids for commodity processing and would just go out and buy things. I don't think we're not seeing that anymore. But you do have to solicit from vendors who have been approved, but you have to actually do the solicitation. If you are going to get anything other than, quote, the brown box. If you're going to send flour to Riches to make whole wheat rolls, or if you're going to send chicken to Tyson's to do chicken nuggets, you've got to do the legwork and do the solicitation. So, the thing is, USDA threw a few little interesting questions in here that we really did not have. These contracts have to give the value pass-through method. Rebates, I haven't seen a single one on rebates, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not big on rebates because if you're dealing with a manufacturer or a distributor or a processor, how do you know what rebates they're getting? They don't tell you, you don't know. And what I see more is this fee for service where up front you know what you're going to pay for what. that's basically what I'm seeing. Direct discount, this hybrid net off invoice. My philosophy would be keep it as simple as possible. And that is what I have seen from the processing contracts. Now, you've got to have the same information. And I don't think I did a slide on this. I think Babette has this on one of her slides. They ask about food recalls. You have 2 contacts for food recalls. And that is not something we have been accustomed to looking for. And so what we tried to do, the people who were doing commodity processing, either individually or a group, if we knew about it, we tried to communicate with them and say, for this upcoming school year, be sure you've got these things in there. So they kind of threw a few new kinks in the works, and that is also why Babette and the state agency staff worked really hard on updating that sample procurement plan, where those kinds of things are in that sample. Already talked about, I do tend to jump ahead on some of these things. We do want those dollar totals. And so once I realize now, when I get that procurement tool in, I look at those food vendors on the procurement tool. I do a total for that from your procurement table. I look at the information on your income expense report, and then I look at information on that vendor paid list or ledger or whatever you call it in your operation. How close are they? You know, save that for the issues. The thing on issues is all examples of things we have seen that we want you to be aware of, where it's not going to be an issue for you. All right, this tab is where I select which vendors, and then we're going to request these receipts. I typically choose 3 random months, and I only need 3 invoices, 1 from each month. I had 1 or 2 SFAs that sent me every invoice for the whole month for the vendor. And we're doing a spot check. If we do milk and bread and grocery vendor, and we find that we find exceptions to the bid price on each one of those 3, we're going to dig deeper. If we find one that seemed to be an exception, we're going to make you correct it, but it's not like we're going to go and make you pull every invoice. If we check and every single one we check is not matching the bid price, we're going to make you go pull those invoices and get them corrected. This is a part of contract management. Why are you going through all that trouble of getting a bid and then you don't check and make sure that vendor's doing what they're supposed to do? When I get those invoices, I'm also looking at your specifications. And if you specified, and this is one that we've seen more than once, if you specified broccoli florets and they're sending you broccoli cuts, you are not managing your contract. You know, and as much as you love your vendors, there are some that will send you a lower quality product and charge you the very same price for that higher product that you spec'd. So, have your procedures in place to check those things. Your small purchase documentation. The solicitation documents, the responses, your evaluation. your evaluation may be a little penciled in vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, and you have 3 prices handwritten in. If you've got a 1-item thing, that's fine. It's not like we want to overly burden you, but we want to see that you are following the procurement requirements. I typically do not ask specifically for purchase orders because so many people do not use them, but I want to see what you ordered, what you got, how does it compare to your solicitation and the quote you received. Formal procurement, again, I have seen 0 non-competitive proposals. If you are going to buy something without attempting to competitively procure it, you need authorization from the state. So I really have not seen that. And then this again, kind of a review. I do ask about rejected bids. If you had any rejected bids, very few people have rejected bids. If you reject a bid, be sure to document the reason why you rejected it. If it was due at 5 p.m. on Monday and they brought it at 5:15 p.m., you better reject it. Because if I'm one of those other vendors that got my bid in on time, I will definitely challenge that bid if you accepted something outside the solicitation. Anytime you use scoring sheets with a procurement, be sure you keep those and be sure that you can explain scores. If you are evaluating a proposal and you gave somebody 15 and somebody else 0, you better have some comments about why they got a 0 and the other one got 15 out of 15. It isn't favoritism to be used and you just select, oh, I like them, I'm going to give them 15, I'm going to give them 0. Will not work. The processing contracts, I have had a lot of communication with Mac. He has been great in providing me information. I started out thinking, okay, I need to know who is getting commodities and USDA, I'm old school still, USDA foods. And so he did send me that information. He also knows which SFAs are processing. So that was helpful information for me. Because I did have one who forgot, and I really do think they forgot to put their USDA foods processing on their procurement table. One of the issues with USDA foods is we do need a reconciliation, and we're going to talk about this under our procurement issues later this afternoon. Okay, I am going to go through this one. We've covered this enough already this morning. We want to see that written code of conduct, and it has to have these things in it. I was reviewing an organization that is under a parish. They weren't a public school, and they had some very good ethics and kind of code of conduct language, but it did not provide for disciplinary action. So just because you have one, you've got to make sure it prohibits acceptance of gratuities or favors, and that it does provide for disciplinary action. So that's why so many people are using that sample on the state agency's website. Your procurement plan. Babette, I'm gonna let you talk more about, she's got a whole session on this. Specifications. Be sure you have specifications even for those informal purchases. You know, it's just like with paper. If you're gonna buy paper, a lot of people don't buy paper, but if you're going to be buying paper for your copy machine and you're going to get quotes, you better tell that vendor what weight paper you want. Do you want 20 pound, 60 pound? What do you want? That's what we're talking about. When you're doing even quotes, you need some specification. And then that cost or price analysis for procurements exceeding the applicable small purchase threshold. This is USDA language. Why do you need a cost analysis for your informal procurements? Well, how do you know that it meets that threshold that you have for your organization? So keep yourself some notes. That's, you know, when you're deciding what purchase method you're going to use, you've got to have an idea of how much money you're going to be spending. That's what this is getting to. And here is another question that is, well, let me say it was new to me, that we have also addressed in the sample procurement plan. Take steps to assure that small, minority, and women's business enterprises and labor surplus firms are used when possible. If you had that question, think about how are you going to explain how you do that.
But just to clarify, we can't score in preference of that.
That's right. You
Okay.
can seek them out and ask them to participate.
Okay.
And that's where some of this wording will come from with the procurement plan. All right. Questions about the process? You know, I do try to tell everyone, you know, if you get it and you have questions, email me or call me. You know, we want you to be successful. We want you to have the minimum number of findings. But if we find something, we have to document it. The other thing that, so far as this process goes, you know, I've reviewed some SFAs and they've told me up front, you know, in 2016-17 school year, we did not have this in our bid solicitation. But for the school year we're in right now, it was included. That is where I ask them to send me that solicitation from this year, and that's the kind of thing that moves something from a finding to technical assistance. It tells me that SFA knows the requirements, they followed through, and so under TA, the technical assistance I'll put in 16-17 school year, this was missing, SFA corrected this, and you move on. Questions? Okay.
Should we put every vendor, person, body on that tool that we ever wrote a check to from school lunch funds?
I will say no, we do not look at labor.
No, I'm not talking about labor, let's just say
I've
travel,
had people send me labor.
employee travel.
Employee travel, USDA says yes. I will tell you, I will never select an employee on employee travel to
Okay.
review. And I have received pages and pages of those from large
Like,
districts.
We buy gas locally.
Gas, we do.
Pretty much, all right, so.
Gas we do want to see. Gas is another one that if you have schools in different areas, and let's face it, if you're buying a lot of gas, I would probably,
Well, we're not, but I mean,
yeah, you know, just don't go buy all your gas from the same gas station under a micro purchase.
Yeah, I'm talking about like travel from, for the employee going to, I don't know, wherever, and they're on this ledger,
Yeah,
listed, I'm supposed, so I gotta, my tool's gonna be long.
yeah. Yeah. We've tried to get USDA to tell us we didn't have to have y'all put that on there. We couldn't get that.
Have you come across an instance whereas a solicitation has gone out and there was no response?
Yes.
And how was that
The
handled?
question was asked, have you seen where a solicitation went out and there was absolutely no response? And we have seen that. It's not real frequent that that happens. And the one that I did have was a very small district. They were trying to do bids. And so we talked to them about possibly doing quotes instead of bids and dealing with it that way. I mean, and let's face it, all these things with Buy American, all these provisions, all this stuff makes us less desirable as a customer. How about that as a tactful way to put it? But yeah, and then if you're small. So I've actually reviewed several small SFAs that they don't have any bids. I've actually had one that had only micro purchase, and they were doing it right. So if you're trying to get a bid and you cannot, you've got to look at one of those other methods and say, how can I make something work for me? So part of that may be using micro purchase, going out and finding, all right, who are the vendors in this area? Am I going to have to send somebody to pick things up? And you're going to have to work some phones and figure out, is there somebody that will do business with me? Now, I will also say this, and Babette may kill me, but I had a very small SFA, a one-site residential facility. And you talk about small, they're very small. And they were piggybacking off another bid. It wasn't being done exactly right, and so the revised procurement plan does talk about piggybacking, and we have a question, so we're going to discuss that more this afternoon. And so you may want, if you're really small, you may want to see if that is an option. Some districts do not want others piggybacking. Piggybacking is the same as cooperative purchasing. It does not absolve you of the responsibility of seeing that all those federal requirements are met.